welcome back to the Ice Vision podcast. And we're bringing a special episode today. We got a special guest joining us, fellow sport management student at Brock University, and from the BSBA podcast, my former podcast, we got Christian Romano joining us. How's it going today, Christian?
Not too bad at all. Not too bad. Unfortunately, former BSBA podcast member.
Yeah.
But no. I mean, I'm glad to be on the podcast today. Looking forward to some great discussions, and I'm just very thankful that you're having me today.
Yeah, awesome. Love to hear it. So, the NHL playoffs been going on, CHL playoffs. You been keeping up with any of the hockey lately? I know you're more of a soccer fan, but I know you kind of follow everything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I like to dabble myself, even though my Rangers aren't in it. I'm unfortunately having to jump on the Leafs bandwagon just based on the fact that I live in the Greater Toronto area, so I'm having to follow it, and a lot of my friends are Leafs fans, so I've been on that bandwagon. So, but even just outside of Leafs, I mean, of course, watching a lot of the hockey, especially the hockey that went on last night. I know we'll talk about it later on, but just the fact that Dallas is just looking really dangerous, and I've been saying it even on the BSBA podcast. I think that they can go very, very far, but to later discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody knows my thoughts on Dallas have been definitely a favorite for a while. But besides that, there's another tournament going on right now in the hockey world, the World Championship, which Canada thus far has been dominant at. And obviously, you're going to be dominant when you take Crosby, McKinnon, Macklin Celebrini, you take guys of that caliber there. But yeah, have you been keeping up with any of that? I watched the game yesterday against France, but that's really all I've watched so far. But honestly, kind of a fun tournament.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we're seeing a lot of the guys that, more veteran players, obviously guys that are out of the playoffs. You name guys like Crosby, you name guys like McKinnon, you're naming all these great hockey players that unfortunately are not in playoff hockey, but nonetheless, I didn't watch the game. I watched the highlights, and to be honest, I don't know what it is when Crosby puts on the Canada jersey. He looks like he's like in his prime. That one goal he
Yeah.
scored, I'm like, I don't know, well, due respect to France, I know they're not a dominant hockey country, but holy man, Canada looked really good in that game. From the highlights, may I add. But yeah, I mean, I haven't been really following it. I've been keeping up here and there on it, trying to, but I mean, Canada's looking dominant, and honestly, no real surprise. We saw the Four Nations, and when you're playing again, like I said, France, it is what you get, right? But I know it's only prelim, but it's looking interesting, and I'm glad again to see that McKinnon and Crosby line up again. It's really nice to see them playing in red and white.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of fun, too, to see Crosby playing with Fleury again, right? Fleury ending his career right now, getting to play with his old captain. So that's really cool, too. It is interesting, though. I know we're talking a lot about how Canada's dominating and stuff. You can see surprises at this tournament. Just this year, the U.S. lost to Switzerland in an overtime game. I didn't see what the final score was, but I saw the highlight. The U.S. was playing Norway. They were up 5-1, and Norway battled back to force overtime just earlier today. I didn't see who ended up winning it, but so those upsets can happen. You have to remember a lot of these guys that are playing are professional players. Now they're not NHL players, but they're playing professional overseas. So you can still see some upsets for sure. And if your team's out of the NHL playoffs and you don't feel like watching it, that's another good level of hockey to watch, 100%. But anyways, one question I had about this tournament is about Connor Bedard actually. So obviously we talked about Macklin Celebrini getting to play on a line with Sidney Crosby, and there's been a lot of talk about how that's probably great for his development. Bedard decided not to go to the tournament. He decided, and he said to the media, "I'm not going because I'm going home and I'm going to work on my skating, which is like his biggest weakness right now as an NHL player, and just overall improving for next year, especially considering like." He had what he would consider a disappointing year and what a lot of people consider a disappointing year. So my question is, do we think this is the right decision? Do we think Bedard should have maybe gone and that experience playing for Team Canada would have been better for him? Or just taking the time to just focus on his skills is the better long-term decision for him? What do you think?
I mean, to be honest, we talk about this a lot, and especially in hockey, it's becoming more prevalent. Hockey players' destinies are in the fate of their own hands, and they ultimately, with any other athlete, they decide where and when they feel is the best avenue for them to succeed. And I think it's within his rights to say that he chose not to go. It is an honor, and we should not forget the fact that to play for the national team at any level of sport, it is a higher, it is a more accelerated, more enjoying experience per se, but ultimately you're there to perform. And you could see that Bedard is in that mindset where he's taking into consideration that, yeah, it's a great honor for him to play for the Canadian national team, but he's really trying to focus on what his impact could be on that, and not just, just to be part of the ride. And I think that putting that into consideration, I'm hoping, because it did say that he is trying to take a rest for the summer and then focus to get back into some sort of training program. I don't know what he's going on within his own party, but it does seem like he is taking into the consideration that he's not just gonna be like, yeah, I'll go for the ride and I'm just gonna, take that pride as a Canadian to, play for the team. But is he really like going to, be that focal point that they need him to be? Because we saw for the Blackhawks this year, outside of his first season, he's just, his second season just looked very off pace. Didn't really look himself. Obviously, his goal drought and his point tally there shows it all. And I think that he's really taken into consideration where he is as an athlete. And I think that again, within his rights. And like we also named Crosby, it also gives room for other athletes, whether it be veterans or more experience or even just younger talent, to then play for the national team and to show themselves at the international stage, outside of the big names. And not to say that Crosby isn't a big name, but when you're coming to the tail end of your career, it's also nice for a lot of the fans in the country to see you play. But ultimately, I think that Bedard's within his own rights, and I think that he's really taking into consideration his I wouldn't say his longevity, but I think more just the fact that he wants to propel himself forward, and by doing so, he thinks that the best steps for him is to take this summer and to just focus on that preseason training, individual training, and then getting himself ready so that when he comes into the NHL season next year, he doesn't feel rushed or he doesn't feel unprepared. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Chris?
No, I completely agree with you, and I think it is probably I won't necessarily say the right decision because I think, well, it's not the wrong decision either, is what I clearly want to say. I think it really depends on the player, and you made a good point. Bedard he has it in his own hands. He's making the decision that he thinks best for his career. Keep in mind, too, the upcoming NHL season is a contract year for him. At the end of the season, it'll be his third year in the league. He'll be signing an RFA contract. So improving his performance is extremely important. And I mean, we talk about him like obviously he had a disappointing year compared to expectations, but he's still the most productive or second most productive teenager of all time in the NHL history, right? Like he was very young coming into the league and was like lights out for the Blackhawks. It's just that he didn't take that next step in his second year. So, and again, you go back to, again, I think his biggest flaw in his game right now is his skating. If that's his goal over the summer is to improve his skating, look out the NHL next year, right? So, yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't necessarily think it's the wrong decision, but it's not like it's the right decision to go either. Like it depends on the player, right? Macklin Celebrini is probably going to take a lot from it, and Bedard could have, but Bedard has chosen that, going and training and everything is the better option. And I understand the frustration as fans too. You would have loved to see Connor Bedard playing with Celebrini and McKinnon and Crosby and all those guys, but no, I think it is probably the right career choice for him, especially when you consider that it's a contract year coming up for him as well.
100%. So yeah, I agree, and I think we should honestly leave it up to the fans. Decide if you guys believe that Bedard being in is a good idea, or choosing not to be part of it is a good idea, or any general thoughts on it. Because, like you said, Chris, it's up in the air, right? Because if you're on the inside and you're understanding Bedard and the fact that maybe he himself doesn't feel prepared for this NHL season coming up, then you could maybe sympathize with that. But again, we're not on the inside; we're looking at this as fans, right? So I don't know. Leave it up to the fans here. What they decide.
Yeah, leave it up to the fans. Well, I don't know if that's always the right way to go, as proven by our next session here. The NHL quarter century team was just announced. The National Hockey League put it out. Now, this was a fan voted team. I don't know if you knew that. It was a fan voted team. And there's been a little bit of controversy online over the team. Obviously, one of the big things is there's three defensemen on it, among other things. But so I'm going to leave it here. We have the team in front of us. I'm not going to read off every player. Viewers, you can go look that up yourselves. But just to get started, who are some snubs? Who are some players that aren't on this team that should be? So this is players from 2000 to 2025.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys do want to check it out, it's just on the NHL website. You can literally just search it up. But man, you know what? I very much actually like this team. I do think that they're very forward heavy. If you look on the list, there's about what 12 forwards and 3 defensemen. So I don't know, and I feel like there were a lot
And
of
six
defensemen
goaltenders.
and 6 goaltenders. Yeah, you're right. Mind you, though, the 6 that are here: Brodeur, Fleury, Lundqvist, Luongo, Price, and Waugh. Like, I mean, they're all studs. Like, they're all the best, if not one of the best. But definitely on the defensive side, there is a lot of snubs there. I would have. I don't know. I think you could make a couple arguments for a couple people. Like, I'm surprised that PK Subban didn't get a shout out. I like PK. I'm surprised that guys like see, I don't know, because on the defensive side, you kind of the way that hockey is propelled in the last, like you say, quarter century, like 25 years, it has been a lot more offensive heavy. So a lot of defensive guys do get kind of thrown, but honestly don't know. Like, I definitely want to say that there's been some snubs out there. I'll leave it to you, Chris, to go into the specifics, but I'm having a hard time struggling because I do very much like this team. But in terms of the defensive side, it's kind of hard if you were to have a limit as to what players you had and then take out a defenseman for one of the forwards that are on this list. I don't know. You give me your opinions, though, Chris.
Yeah, for sure. So I have quite a few opinions. Most of them are defensemen. First of all, biased opinion. I think Victor Hedman should be on the list. Obviously, I'm a Lightning fan, so that is a biased opinion. But I mean,
Yeah.
you look at his career. Like, I think it's hard to argue with the type of player he is. Norris caliber defenseman, Conn Smythe winner, 2 Stanley Cups. That's a guy that absolutely deserves it, in my opinion. To your point about the focus getting more and more towards offense as kind of the quarter century has went on, we'll say. There's actually another defenseman who definitely, in terms of offense, could be on this list, and that's Erik Karlsson, multiple-time Norris winner, borderline Hart Trophy winner at times. That's another guy that could be on this list. And then kind of to round out, I would say, so that puts us at 5 defensemen. To round out, I would say 2 more defensemen that I think deserve to be on the list are Duncan Keith with the Chicago Blackhawks, obviously 3 cups. Conn Smythe, multiple Norris Trophy winner, one of the best defensemen of his time. Obviously, his prime was kind of like short in a way, like it was about 6, 7 years, and then he kind of fell off really hard. So I can understand that mindset, but I think his prime speaks for itself. And then Drew Doughty, like obviously he's still going strong now, but through the 2010s, early 2010s to even late 2010s, he was one of the best defensemen in the world, and I think he absolutely deserves that. Also, multiple time Cup winner, multiple time Norris winner, and so yeah, I think those guys absolutely deserve to be on there. On the forward side, I actually think there are some snubs as well, and I'll even go a little further and see who I would swap out. Joe Thornton, I think I would take off the list completely. I think he should be off, and yeah, Anze Kopitar should be on over Joe Thornton in my opinion. Both California centers. Anze Kopitar, multiple-time Norris or Selke winner and a multiple-time Cup winner. Joe Thornton was obviously a great center, one of the best of his time. Didn't have a ton of playoff success in the way Kopitar did, and I don't like rating playoff success when you're comparing players, but when you're looking at like the best of a quarter century, I think it needs to be taken into consideration. And so yeah, absolutely, Anze Kopitar is one I would 100% have on this list.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. See, I want to butt in here though. This is the thing that I was having to struggle with when I saw this team. You think what the way I see quarter century best team, I just think of just impact. See, with all the guys that are on this list, I think of just impact, and every single one of them has had a huge impact for their team. The only thing is, and with Anze Kopitar 100%, I mean, the Kings, when in that prime era, without Anze Kopitar, would have struggled significantly. I agree with that 100%. But see, it's hard for me because I love all these guys on this list. The only thing that I would agree with is that I do think that on the defensive side, maybe you could take out somebody else and moving them around. One name I'm surprised you didn't name is Brent Burns. Brent Burns,
Yeah,
I think, has got that longevity, and he's a player that just he put up insane numbers, by the way, in his prime. He was leading in points for a defenseman. Obviously now Cale Makar's smashing all these records, but even currently he still holds a high point tally for a defenseman.
yeah. And my thing with Burns was for a long time a very solid defenseman, and then he exploded for 3 years and was arguably the best defenseman in the world. And then he's just back to being a solid defenseman. And in my mind, it's like he's got 1 Norris Trophy. I think he was like a Hart Trophy nominee or like a top five in
Mm-hmm.
Hart Trophy
He
over that
was, yeah.
3 year span, and that's like basically it. Like, there's no team success. There's nothing else along with that. And when you compare him to like the rest of like the high end defensemen, like Brent Burns versus Cale Makar's career, Cale Makar has already lapped Brent Burns as far as I'm concerned. In overall impact, his prime's been way longer. He's been a better player and just had better overall success. Erik Karlsson versus Brent Burns. I think Erik Karlsson has had the much better career. I think Drew Doughty's had the better career, and I think Duncan Keith had the better career. So I think Burns, yeah, I can absolutely see Burns being in that
Yeah.
argument, but like I can't put him over any of those guys. And then obviously the guys already on the list. Zdeno Charno was
No,
like
he 100%, 100%.
extremely impactful. Nick Lidstrom, I think, is the second best defenseman of all time behind Bobby Orr, so he absolutely deserves to be in that
Would you
position.
even give guys like Chris Letang a bone? Would you throw him a bone?
Again, Letang is another one. Letang I have very firmly in that. Letang is almost the opposite of Burns in a way, where Letang has always been like a top pairing defenseman and always an elite
Yes.
defenseman, but never was Letang a top 3 defenseman in the league. Never was he even a top 5 defenseman in the league, but he was basically his entire career up until the last couple seasons always in that top 10 space. So he's like he's that lower tier compared to, again, I
Yeah,
think he's about
I
that
can see
level of
it.
Burns. He's just a step behind all those other guys, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see
Yeah.
that.
hmm
Just saying,
And yeah,
give a little love to our Canadian brothers.
yeah, I know. And I shouted out a few. Don't get me wrong. You know,
No, I'm just
Doughty and
messing
Keith are
around.
both Canadians, but yeah. So me personally, though, and actually a big part of my grievance with this list is I think there's too many goalies on it, and not because
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think. And not because I don't think like goalies aren't important or anything, but I think if you're making this to be a team, I think you should fill out every position like you would an actual team. So that means 2 goalies, 6 defensemen, and however many forwards, right? If that's how they want to market it at, right? The problem is that means you have to cut 4 of these 6 goaltenders somehow. Which,
Yeah.
and by the way, I also think that Vasilevsky has kind of been snubbed if we're going with this many goaltenders, because I think Vasilevsky has
Yeah, but I don't know,
Vasilevsky,
man.
okay,
I don't know.
Vasilevsky,
Out of all the goaltenders that are being put on here, I think Vasilevsky falls short. I personally, I mean, who would you take? Like, if we're taking out a goaltender from this list, who would you replace?
Fleury for one. 100%
You think?
Vasilevsky over Fleury.
You
I get
think?
it. It's Fleury's last year. He's a fan favorite and all that. Vasilevsky has been the better. Like, you compare careers straight across. Vasilevsky is a Conn Smythe, has 2 cup wins. Fleury has 3 cups, but he was a backup for 2 of them. And Vasilevsky has more, or no, he has the same amount of Vezinas. Never mind. But I think overall Vasilevsky's been a much better goaltender than Fleury through their careers. I'm not going to say anything else on that because then the fans will, or the listeners will get a little upset at me. But I think he's above more than just Fleury on this list for sure. But
Well,
again,
if we're gonna do
top
that,
2,
then wouldn't you want to throw guys in like Jonathan Quick or even like James Reimer? I mean, come on, like there's some great goaltenders that I would say we're on the same level as Vasilevsky. I'd say Jonathan Quick especially is on that same level as effectiveness, as games won, to trophies, save, even got things like save percentage. I mean, I don't know, man. And I'm not just saying that because Jonathan Quick is a Ranger, but come on.
I disagree on Jonathan Quick. I think Quick was a step below. One of the biggest part of Quick's success was being on a heavily defensive team in LA for years, right? Not saying he was a bad goalie by any means, but for one thing, he was never, I don't believe, ever even a Vezina finalist, much less a Vezina winner, right? So he was never the consensus best goalie in the league. Vasilevsky had years where he was the best goalie in the league.
Yeah.
Had a long stretch of his career where he was the best goalie in the league. Like, I comfortably would say Vasilevsky is as good of a goaltender as Henrik Lundqvist was in his prime, Carey Price was in his prime, maybe a step below Marty Brodeur and Patrick Waugh, but definitely those guys.
Yeah.
I would also, especially talking about Price, I would argue Vasilevsky has better longevity than Price. Obviously, Price's peak
100%,
was
100%,
insane.
yeah.
But
Yes.
so yeah, I would comfortably put Vasilevsky around that Lundqvist, Luongo, Price tier. Waugh and Brodeur, I'd still have above him. But my thing with Waugh on this list is Waugh played 4 seasons from the year 2000 on. And so I think personally, if you're looking at just from 2000 to 2025,
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't think Waugh should be on the list because he hasn't,
Well-
he just doesn't have the long-term impact, right?
Well, mind you, though, even in those 4 years, he was still
Yeah,
like
that's
he was.
fair.
It's you know what I mean. Like Waugh was still like, and that's the thing with Waugh. Like, if we're talking longevity, man, him and Brodeur, like, they played for a long time. Just like
Yeah.
guys like Fleury are now. Luongo when he was still in the league, Longfist when he's still in the league. The way that Fleury still what or was still going, he's now as we all know. But even but that is a fair point. You could definitely say that if we are to cut, you could cut out those 4 years, even though they were crucial. And that is also something that I also want to talk about with a lot of these forwards. You got guys already like Austin Matthews on the list. You got guys already like Connor McDavid on the list, and not at all to snub their careers at all, but they are fairly young. They are, still in their 20s or mid to late 20s. They still got a long time in the league and ahead of them. And I know this was within the last 25 years, but would there realistically be anybody that you would say, longevity wise, that you could possibly replace these two with, or do you honestly think that they are just solid, like staple quarter century players?
No, I think absolutely. And you talk about, and I think with this too, like obviously we've been talking a lot about their overall on ice impact and stuff like that. Like McDavid and Matthews have been pretty much consensusly the last 6, 7 years top five players, right? How many players that are even on this list can actually say that, right? Over a 5, 6, 7 year period, they've been the like top five player in the league, right? That list is very low across even the history of the NHL. So I think they absolutely deserve to be up there. The knocks on them obviously are the long-term team performance, like no cups between any of them or anything like that. But I think just the overall impact they've had on the ice is important. I actually want to talk about a couple forwards, and that is in Joe Sakic and Teemu Selanne. And I already mentioned Joe Thornton, who I just think, like, I think Thornton had a great career. Don't get me wrong, but I just think Kopitar should be above him. I think Joe Sakic, he falls in the same place with me that Patrick Waugh does, in that he just didn't play for a long portion of the
Yeah,
time in the 2000s,
yeah,
and like it was at the tail end of his career where he wasn't near as good as like Joe
mm-hmm.
Sakic's prime was in the 90s, right? Like early
Yeah.
2000s, he
No,
was
you're
still
right.
good,
You're
but like
right.
it
No,
kind of fell
yeah.
off. Teemu Selanne the same way. His prime was in the 90s. Not so much the dominant player in the 2000s. Very solid player. Won a cup with Anaheim in 2007 through the early 2000s. But it's not like he was an elite player in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But and like so those are two I would probably take off the forward end. A big part and like an argument for any of the old heads that are yelling at me at the screen right now is I would go with Jaromir Jagr over either one of them, because Jaromir
Yeah,
Jagr also a
yeah,
90s star but was a dominant player right up until he left for the KHL, I believe in 2005 or 2006. And then he came back and was still like a top of the lineup player for a number of
yeah,
years before eventually falling down because he turned 45. But you know what I
yeah.
mean? Like
No, I agree. I
I would
agree.
comfortably put Yager over any of those guys. Another guy that I would also throw in there alongside Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid. Who else has been like a consensus top 10 player over the last 7, 8 years or whatever? Nikita Kucherov. Why is he not on this list? And I know I'm a biased Lightning fan, but like
No, but that
seriously,
is a fair
he's
show.
been he's been one of the most productive players in the league.
Oh,
Art
100%.
finalist this year, has a Hart Trophy win, won the last two Art Ross trophies, been the most productive player in the playoffs, not named Connor McDavid over the last 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and multiple-time Cup winner. Like I think Kucherov should absolutely be on this list. Now, again, like I said, Sakic, Selanne, Thornton are the guys I would take off at forward. I would comfortably put Kopitar, Kucherov, and Yarmer Yager in their place, is what I would say on the forward end. And then,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, cut four of the goaltenders, or maybe even three. You can go with three goalies if you want. And then I would add those couple defensemen I mentioned earlier. That's my take on this team, anyways.
No, that is fair. And honestly, at the end of the day, I still think this is pretty solid. Besides from a few tweaks that we suggested, but at the end of the day, I still think that longevity wise, a lot of these guys are fair. I mean, the one thing I do disagree with you is that the goaltender thing. I think they got the goaltenders down perfectly. I still think that you got to give Vasilevsky, even though he is like 34, you still got to give him a few more years to solidify that and maybe put him in that list, because I still think that all these goaltenders here still had better careers in my opinion. But definitely, throwing in Kucherov, I'm surprised he didn't make it. Yager, surprised, and even like I talked about, why guys like Brent Burns didn't make it on the defensive side when you only put three defensemen. I still think that's pretty crazy, and I think that maybe a lot of NHL fans are also falling on that trend that offense is now been the kind of the quarter century's main focus, because a lot more forwards have been taking the spotlights now. Even now, in in the NHL playoffs, you don't really hear a lot of the defensive players being thrown out as standout in comparison to their forward lines, right? So, anyways, a later topic for discussion, but I just think that maybe that's also the way hockey's moving and or has moved in the last 25 years.
Yeah, I'm still going to disagree with you on the goalies, but we'll shake on it for now.
Fair, yeah, we'll shake on it for
and
now.
the one thing to remember too is it is a fan vote, right? And so fans are just going to vote for their favorite players. That's what it is.
Exactly.
It's not like the NHL analysts put this out. I think it's just fun discussion to have. What would a more serious, not so much popularity made list?
Yeah, like what
right?
what would 4 lines look like in a goaltender?
Yeah, what
right?
would 4 lines, 6D, and 2 goaltenders look like
exactly.
if this team was done? So moving on, let's talk the NHL playoffs. Who are the frontrunners for the MVP at this point? The Conn Smythe. We got quite a number of players that have been absolutely dominant. I got a list here of the guys that I think won from each team, but curious if you have any thoughts on who could be the frontrunners for the MVP.
I'm going to just say it right now. Currently, and I think that regardless of where the Stars go, I think Mikko Rantanen he's got it locked down. He's just, oh my god, it's like he's been playing for the Stars for years. He's just gelled so well into that team. He's firing on all cylinders, and I'm watching them play the Jets, and they're just he's just. I know Hellebuck doesn't have a great playoff record. Going into last night's game, he's like 0-4 on the road. In the series of the NHL playoffs for the Jets, but don't get me wrong, he's been pretty solid, and I've actually been impressed the fact that especially in the Blues series he looks very, very solid in my opinion. But Rantanen's just, oh my god, he's finding the net left, right, and center. It's like he can't miss. I think that he's been a player that's turned his career on, especially when we've talked about his trades, the fact that he's been moving around. Everyone's questioning what's going to happen to him, and I think he must love Dallas because he's doing real business, and I think he is a number one front runner for the MVP, and a shocking one at that, because not to talk about not to say that they disregard his quality on ice, but to the fact that he just translated that in such rapid time to a completely different team. It just blew me away. I was so surprised, and that's my reasoning for it as to why I also think that the Stars will probably go on and win the whole thing, in my opinion. But another shout out is Barkov. I think that Barkov, and even someone that you don't also have on your list here, Sam Bennett. Those guys have been freaking firing for the Panthers, man. I'm like, holy, because I honestly did not believe in this Panthers team, and when the Leafs were 2-0 up in the series, I thought, yeah, if the Leafs, I mean, we all know the Leafs, how they have a tendency to choke, and now it's 2-2 in the series, but I said if the Leafs can get a strong hand on this team, because I personally don't believe in the Panthers, they could probably go 4-0 in the series, but Leafs being the Leafs, they choked it. And also because of the performances from Barkov and Sam Bennett. They've been firing. Guys like Carter Verhaeghe are rejuvenating their careers, in my opinion, because he's been kind of quiet this season. But from when you got on lines with like Sam Bennett, he's really getting in front of there and getting pucks on net. And a lot of redirection goes, to be honest, for Verhaeghe, because you know how he is as that center, just crowding that crease. But I think it's because of the performances from Barkov and Bennett that have pushed or elevated actually the Panthers to going far into into these rounds, and who knows, potentially even going to the conference final if they do take the Leafs in 6 or 7. But I think those are also some shout out players that I'd also like to put on. And then as a final note, Nylander's been on a crazy run. I don't know. He keeps wearing the same freaking suit and keeps scoring. I don't know what it is, but he's been great. And even Logan Thompson. I mean, I thought that the Capitals were going to take that series because I had them going and to win the conference, and because of the Canadian in me, I was just like, oh no, but I can't let that happen. We need to have the Leafs take it and all that. But long story short, getting to my point, Logan Thompson, front runner for MVP. He's been solid for the Capitals, even though unfortunately they do look like they might go out to the Hurricanes, because the Hurricanes have been very, very strong. And I think that is just more on a team base rather than an individual aspect. I know you have Slavin here. as one of your MVP frontrunners, but I think that he's been a solid player for the Capitals, and I think that he'd also
For
be
the
another shout at
Hurricanes.
MVP. Yes,
Slavin.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Slavin, yes, Slavin,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with a lot of your points. Obviously, Rantanen is definitely the front runner. A couple shouts out on Dallas too, though. Obviously, Rantanen's the front runner right now. Conn Smythe typically goes to the Cup winner, so a lot could change in 2 rounds. Don't get me wrong, but Rantanen through rounds 1 and 2 has been the best player in the playoffs for sure. Also on Dallas though, Jake Ottinger has been unreal, especially that game last night. Like he shut the Winnipeg down, right? And Winnipeg controlled pace of play for most of the game, couldn't get anything past Ottinger. And then Thomas Harley as well, I think deserves a shout. Stepping up with Miro Heiskanen. Now, obviously, Heiskanen was back last night, but Harley kind of took over and was running that blue line, especially considering they have such a weak blue line outside of, Heiskanen, Lindell, and Harley. And yeah, Harley has been standout for them as well. So I think any of those three could definitely be considered a front runner for the award. Rantanen's production right now, as well as just the general storyline surrounding him, I think just put him ahead. The obvious answer is Connor McDavid for front runner for MVP. If the Oilers win the cup, McDavid is going to win the Conn Smythe at this point, especially because Draisaitl very much looks like he's playing injured right now. I think, and
Yeah, you could definitely see
so
it.
yeah,
He's slower.
so yeah, he's struggling a little bit. So, but McDavid has been lights out throughout most of the playoffs. Obviously, a little bit of struggles early on against LA, but after that, he's just been lights out for Edmonton. And that team lives or dies on McDavid because, as I've said on this team multiple times, they just lack so much depth. They need McDavid to score, right? Obviously, they've gotten some contributions from guys like Corey Perry and what's his name there, Evander Kane as well. But yeah, McDavid, they live or die on McDavid, and that's why he's going to be. If the Oilers make it to the Cup final and win the Cup, McDavid wins the Conn Smythe for sure at this point. Shout out Evan Bouchard too. Throughout the LA Kings series, he was getting a lot of flack thrown at him for his play and because of some turnovers and stuff. But he has turned it around a ton. He is showing why he is probably a top three offensive defenseman in this league. Why he's one of the most dominant defensemen in the league when he's on. And another guy too that is close enough to the McDavid that depending on their production, Bouchard could also overtake him on that team. But again, very unlikely. But Bouchard's another guy. If you want to talk about MVPs for the Oilers, Bouchard's the guy as well. Nylander, obviously, I agree with you completely. He's been the Leafs' best player by far, which is both a good thing, obviously, because like you want a skilled guy like that to be playing at a high level, but also kind of a bad thing because you kind of want the Leafs' best player to be Austin Matthews, who has really struggled at this point. And hopefully he can turn that around. Obviously, the production there is fine in terms of points, but he's not scoring, right? There's no goals coming, and you need Matthews to be scoring. So hopefully tonight, the game starts in 15 minutes, so hopefully they can turn that around, right? But another shout out I would give for Toronto if Sam Bennett didn't kill him was Anthony Stolarz. Because he was lights out for the Leafs too, obviously. And Joseph Wall is absolutely a goaltender capable of doing that. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Toronto made it to the finals. One of their goaltenders won the Conn Smythe. It would not shock me in the slightest. And then for the Jets, Kyle Connor has been their standout best player. Obviously, for the Jets to move on, Connor Hellebuck needs to be their best player because he's a huge part of why they're the dominant team they are. But Kyle Connor has been outstanding for them. Like I remember watching that game 7 against the Blues where they came back and ended up winning.
Yeah.
Connor is
Oh, he was
Connor's
gross.
absolutely terrifying to watch with the puck. He's got that
Oh my
Connor
god,
McDavid
yeah.
in him where every time the puck's on his stick, if you're a fan for the other team, you're like, he's gonna put this in the back of the net.
Yeah.
Like he is just disgusting. He's one of the best goal scorers on the team, one of the best in the league, frankly. Like I want
Oh,
to say he finished
100%,
top
yeah.
5 in goals this year.
Yeah,
And
he did.
I kind of an underrated guy, honestly. Like when you
He
talk
always,
about
yeah.
Winnipeg, you talk about Hellebuck, you talk about Scheifele, you talk about Morrissey, and Kyle Connor kind of gets left out. But yeah, like obviously he's been the best forward for them. A big shout out too. I will give it a shout out to Neil Pionk as well, who really stepped up with Morrissey going out for
This
those couple of
season,
games
yeah.
and was like absolutely huge
Just
for
all season. I don't
Winnipeg in
even
the
think it's a
playoffs.
playoff thing. I think Neil
Yeah,
Pionk all season has been he was a surprising top defenseman this year because coming into the season, no one really was even talking about Neil Pionk because we're talking about the fact that Hellbuck's going to need all the help all the help because of the fact that that defensive core, although it's not completely weak, could definitely need some rejuvenation. I think maybe a little bit youth in there, and a guy like Neil Pionk coming in there and stepping up and being really huge for the entirety of the season. I think is also a great shout out there. And the one thing about Kyle Connor that I will speak about is that his problem, and I agree with you 100%. I've seen Kyle Connor at his highs, and I've also seen him at his lows. Kyle Connor is a player who has, for some reason, although this season is at the peak of his performances in his career, probably, he has this thing in them where he's a terrific skater and a puck handler, but it's just something about him where he has these off days, and it's kind of like this Matthew effect, and you're starting to see it now in this series where things aren't firing, and all of a sudden it looks like he's just quiet. And this has been a conversation I think going into previous years as to why is Kyle Connor now just starting to be a topic of discussion, because he's always been disgusting in my eyes. I think he's a great player, but he just needs to be more consistent. And I think that the team around him, also that morale, needs to help him through that, because that Game 7 game, he had like the entire stadium behind him, and he was just insane. But now that Dallas is starting to take and creep into the worrying doubts of Winnipeg going out, maybe that's affecting Kyle Connor. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it's the consistency that's following from that regular season and then into that first round. I don't know, but of course I would 100% put Kyle Connor as a front runner, just even based on that first series.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And my final shout I'm going to give, you kind of mentioned Slavin already. I think Slavin is the rock on Carolina's blue line and the rock for that team. I mean, they're the best defensive team in the league, and he's the best defensive defenseman in the league. Like, so he is a huge part of that team's success. One other shout out I want to give to Carolina as well is Andrei Svechnikov, who is really good in the first round. He's kind of quieted down a little bit this series, but if he gets firing again and gets going, like he's probably the best offensive player on that team, him or Sebastian Aho. But it's just awesome to see, especially in the first round, because Svechnikov was a high draft pick, had a lot of expectations in terms of being this big offensive player, and he's been like a consistent 60-point guy since then. But I mean, this playoffs, he's finally kind of showing that, you know, Carolina's issue for years is that they don't have that absolute all-star offensive forward. Svechnikov shown flashes this postseason that he could be that guy and could be a huge part of why Carolina can maybe get over the hump in the conference final. I still ultimately don't think they will. I think they'll beat Washington and lose out to Florida in the conference final. That's just my prediction, but yeah, I do. That's where I think it's going at this point. But Carolina, and for that matter, if Carolina faces the Leafs, I think the Leafs beat them too. I think they're comfortably the third best team in the left in the East right now. But yeah, like I just again because they lack that true offensive star. But Andrei Svechnikov, what he did in the first round, and what he's shown flashes of through these playoffs, is showing that he could maybe end up being that guy for Carolina, which is huge because then they don't have to try and draft one or sign one or anything else. They just have one on their roster. So one to watch out for, especially. I know nobody wants to watch Carolina play because they're boring, but if you get the
That's
opportunity, try and watch them. Pay attention to Andrei Svechnikov because he is a
yeah.
super talented player.
No,
Yeah,
agreed.
that's all I got on this. Do you got anybody else you want to talk about? Any other players?
No, I mean I agree. Yeah, like I said about Carolina, they're a unit. They're a team that relies a lot on their defensive work and a lot of their style of play. I'd like to say. One name also as well that you also have in your list that I also want to mention is Jack Eichel. He's been
Right.
really good for. I'm gonna get this right now. He's been very good for Vegas. Not Logan Thompson. Logan Thompson's been good for the Capitals. Eichel's been good for Vegas, and Vegas have been. You know what? I think Vegas, although the standings do show that Vegas is a strong team, I think consistently, time and time again, they get snubbed out of that West position just because of how good the Jets are, how good the Stars are, how good the Avalanche were, the Oilers, but. And I know that they're going to probably go out, but I've been really impressed with the Golden Knights. They've been, even in this Oilers series, I just think the Oilers have just outdone them. But Jack Eichel and even guys like Mark Stone, coming in and just, putting in solid performances, not to say that he was an MVP, but the fact that their hockey looks really good, and don't ask why I'm staying up till 10:30 watching or in Easter time watching a Vegas Golden Knights game. But the hockey that I've seen has been very impressive, and it's been through Eichel that I think that they've been able to get success up until now, obviously. But I'd also like to just throw him in the conversation because I also think that, outside of even the playoff performance, his regular season performance is up there with a lot of these guys that we've just named.
Yeah, absolutely. Eichel is a guy like I think he had 96 points in the play or in the regular season this year, but he's a really good two-way forward too. He has like really good defensive impacts consistently throughout. He's not like a Selke level defenseman or forward by any means, but he very rarely gives anything back in the same way that he's putting in the back of the net, and that was really shown. Vegas's one win in this season, actually. Eichel did a really good job. The team did a good job matching him up against McDavid. Eichel's one of the few players in the league that can keep up with McDavid from a skating standpoint, and he did a good job shutting down McDavid that game. And going forward, if the Knights want to get back into the series and try to win this series, we'll see tonight. Eichel kind of has to do that. He has to shut down McDavid. That's really their only way. Again, in the same way that McDavid is like everything for Edmonton. If you can shut him down, some down, Edmonton's kind of screwed, especially with the way Draisaitl's played. So yeah, absolutely good shout on Eichel. If the Knights want to get through, Eichel has to be the go-to guy for this series. Yeah. And with that, we'll come to just our final section today, or second last. We got like one quick little discussion at the end, but talking about the Dallas and Winnipeg game last night, we talked about it a little bit. It was a great game, and just from my perspective, Winnipeg was, like I mentioned, I think they were dominant through the first two periods. Even in the third, they controlled play for significant portions of time. Jake Ottinger stood on his head, and Dallas did what they do best. On a turnover, you get those odd man rushes going, and they're going to bury. They're such a talented offensive team, and this is a big plus for any teams that are thinking of adding big trade deadline acquisitions. Obviously, we've talked about Mikko Rantanen, but Michael Granlund was another trade deadline acquisition for Dallas, and he had a hat trick last night. So, yeah, I think that was pretty awesome to see. Obviously, Miro Heiskanen looked great in limited minutes last night, but yeah, it was a good game overall. I think Dallas has taken this series, and like I've said, I think they're the favorite for the cup right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying this even on the BSBA podcast. I personally think that Dallas, and I know everyone was scared because Dallas was on that 7 or 8 loss losing streak going into the playoffs, and everyone was had red flags on them and saying, well, that might hinder that mentality going into the playoffs, but clearly not. Everyone doubted them against the Avalanche, and I backed them, and they've gone through. And the same as being told about this Jets series. Even when some people had the Blues going to beat the Jets, they still put the Blues over Dallas. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, we got to put some respect on this team, man. And I've been saying this about Ottinger. I personally think that he's up there for the Vezina because he is solid, man. Outside of Vasilevsky and Hellebuck, he's up there as one of the best goaltenders this season. Just in impact, insane. And I know that the main focus, not just this series, but in the last, wasn't really on Ottinger. I think he's been fantastic. I think that, now that, guys like, you talked about Granlund getting a hat trick, guys like, Jimmy Benn getting in there, Heskinen's finally back, Rantanen's firing on all cylinders, we already talked about that. And I just think that overall, guys like even Tom Harley, being that defensive presence, but even showing up on that offensive side, becoming more two-way, I think that, and of course with Heiskanen also being that, I think that Dallas by far are playing the best hockey. I think that they're the best team. I've said this even going before the playoffs. I think that everyone was, like I said, set off by that regular season performances, but Dallas is a team to beat right now. Because if they beat the Jets, which I'm projecting that they do, like in this series, I think that they can win the whole thing. I think they can definitely take either the Knights if they decide to come back in, or the Oilers, because like we said, you take out McDavid out of that Oilers team, they will start to struggle significantly, especially with a slowed down version of Draisaitl. But when you take out, like, realistically, the way I see with this Dallas team, in most areas on the ice, you could take a player out of that position, and I still think that they'd struggle, but they'd still perform extremely well. They're just such a well-rounded team. We talked about depth, which is something that the Florida Panthers do have, and although I don't believe in their hockey, that is one thing I have to give them credit for. They have extreme depth. I think that the Dallas Stars also have extreme depth. I think that although that they may be a little older in terms of that depth, I think that they definitely are on the offensive side. I mean, on the defensive side, obviously, we're talking about a lot of young guys. I still think that they're solid. I still think they're well-rounded, and I think that's another reason why Winnipeg is struggling. It's because they don't have that depth, and they do have extremely great players, better than Dallas, in my opinion. But I just don't think that they can cope with the way that they're playing, and I think that ultimately we saw it last night. Winnipeg playing great hockey, but the Stars are able to, ride that tidal wave and come out in the end, with that victory. And I think it's all just down to the way that they're playing, and that's personally why they're going to take this series and win the whole thing, not just the conference. I'm going straight to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think they're the cup favorite. And to your point on depth, like you just look at their lines. You mentioned Rantanen, Granlund, Jamie Benn, like some of these guys that have been playing outstanding for them. Not even to talk about Jason Robertson, who's a 100-point player in the league. Wyatt Johnson, who's one of the best up and coming young players in the league. Tyler Seguin, who has been an absolutely outstanding player for most of his career. Like these are all extremely talented players. Like I said on the podcast that Dallas has two first lines, a second line, and a fourth line. And I absolutely believe that. And like how can you compete with that? They just roll those lines over and over again. Eventually, their whole game plan of just scoring off the rush, forcing turnovers and scoring off the rush, eventually there's going to be a break and there's always a talented player on the ice that can capitalize on it. So they're extremely hard to deal with right now. Now, I will say the Florida series. I'm assuming that's the final. Dallas, Florida is going to be the final. I will say Florida's hard forechecking style will be a challenge for Dallas, but I think ultimately, like you just have to bet on the offense. This is one of the few times where I'll comfortably say the elite offensive team is absolutely going to take it. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Dallas, their forward depth is too hard to deal with, and then with Heiskanen coming back, they're at full strength now. They have going to have some good defensive impacts now with that. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And if you don't have anything else, let's get into one final topic here, talking about the game that's going to start in about 2 minutes. Or well, the opening ceremonies will start. The NHL is always slow. They put the start time at 5 o'clock for me, and then it starts at 5:30. So, but anyways, Leafs Panthers are the Leafs in trouble? Are they going out? Obviously, they came up 2-0 in the series, and now it looks like they're kind of falling apart. So, what's going on?
See, time and time again, you just talked about it. Strong forechecking teams like the Senators, like the Panthers, the Leafs struggle. And this is the one thing that the Leafs, even my dad saying it, being a Leafs fan for, his entire lifetime, watching them, the Leafs always struggle against hard forechecking teams. And I think that that's the one thing that will keep them out of this series is that they need more grit. They need more players with grit. And I know they got guys like Domi, they got Riley, they got a lot of gritty players, but they just need to find a way to play out of it. And they especially need guys like Matthews to get into the flow of things. I know Marner's been hit or miss. I know Tavares has been recently better, but Matthews needs to get in this series now, or they're going out in most likely 7. I wouldn't give them 6. I think that's too harsh, but they will go out in 7. And
Yep.
I think that's fair to say because although in my opinion the Leafs have been playing fantastic hockey. I've loved the hockey that they've been playing. And shout out to Max Pacioretty. He's been one of the standout players taking, a step forward, from the likes of Matthews who hasn't. I think that they just need a little bit more grit if they're going to want to play against guys who are like the Panthers, who are experienced, veterans, experienced playoff players especially. They know how to win a series. And if they're going to do it the hard way and the rough way, then they will do it. And that's the one thing that I think the Leafs need to be able to cope with, especially tonight and moving forward, because it's only going to get more difficult from here. We're talking about if they do end up getting out of this series, they're going to have to play an equally minded team in maybe not the Hurricanes because they are more of a unit defensive minded team. But if they do end up playing a Capitals per se, it's not like they're very much not that different because they are that gritty, more offensive approach team in which the Leafs do tend to struggle with. So I think that they need to figure themselves out now. And this series, again, I agree with this 100%. My friends were telling me this. They said this series will define the Leafs right now. Because if they can beat the Florida Panthers, there's no doubt in my mind that I think they could definitely go and take the Dallas Stars in the final. Because I agree with you. I don't believe too much in the Hurricanes just because of the depth, as well as the hype of the Capitals. I really do think this is the battle for the conference and potentially the cup as well. But the Leafs got to figure it out, man. And we're going to watch tonight after we're done recording. We're going to find out. I personally think that the Leafs can take it tonight, but it's going to have to be based on, a convincing performance. Because if they scrape by tonight, I think that might just seal their fate.
Yeah. No, and I completely agree with a lot what you're saying. The one thing I will add is especially with a team like Florida, the Leafs just need more puck movement out of their zone. They got good defenders. They got like their decor is one of the best this Leafs core has had behind them. But like outside of Riley, they don't have a lot of like elite puck movers. And so they need to find a way to especially when Florida dumps the puck in, they need to get the puck out of the zone quick, not turn it over and create offense going the other way. And that's where they have really struggled. And then, I mean, even if you get past the first wave of the forecheck, you're getting forechecked again in the neutral zone. And like it's just an absolute struggle and a slog to get up and down the ice. And so they have to, and I agree that they need to play a little more gritty, but there needs to be some more skill to their game too, because that's the way you beat a heavy forechecking team like Florida. And so we'll see tonight, especially, I mean, Riley's got to be the MVP here, really, because he's their best puck mover. But you need a guy like Matthews, especially when he gets the chances to start putting him in the back of the net. I think that's the big thing. He's had chances. Marner's had chances and has been pretty consistent so far this postseason. The last two games were great. Nylander obviously is playing great. Tavares has been pretty good as well. Nyes has been outstanding. But the big thing is you need Austin Matthews, your best player, to put the puck in the net when he gets those chances. And so that is going to make or break this series is how they move the puck out of their zone and how they convert on their chances. They need to convert at a higher rate. They're getting the chances. They just need to go in the net now. And yeah, that's kind of my take on it. Anyways, I think Florida's going to win tonight because I think the Leafs are cooked. I think they're losing in six, but obviously history will show what
Yeah,
or
man.
what happens there, right? I hate to be the
Believe me, I'll
pessimist
hear
here,
it.
but
I'll
no,
hear
don't
it.
get me.
Living in the Greater Toronto, oh man, I'm gonna be hearing it for
Yeah.
the entirety of the summer, man. They're just reliving all this, BS. But it's okay. It's okay. We'll hope that this summer will be tolerable.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I would love to see Matthews. Nylander's one of my favorite players in the league. I'd love to see them have some playoff
Oh,
success
of
here. So
course, of
I
course.
absolutely hope it happens. I don't have a lot of hope though. So but with that, I think we're gonna wrap up here. We're at about 50 minutes here, and I know you want to go watch the game. I want to go watch the game myself. So with that, we'll end off. Thank you for joining me today, Christian, because
Of
that was a
course.
lot of fun. It's a lot easier to do a
Yeah.
podcast when I got somebody to talk to. Talking to myself has been getting a little annoying, honestly. So, I
No,
really
of
do
course, man.
appreciate that,
Anytime.
and
Anytime.
yeah, I will definitely have you on again for sure, and don't be afraid to invite me back to the BSBA podcast next year.
Oh,
Everybody,
don't worry
everybody
about it.
listening, go check out the BSBA podcast. I was on there a lot. Go bump up the views on them because that's where I got my start in podcasting, and there's a lot of great guys on there. And going into next semester, there's going to be a lot of great discussion from that group for sure. So if there's not anything else, Christian, we'll say thank you guys all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next episode.